Hello, Tracy here with another scrapbooking process video. Today I'm going to be doing a 12 by 12 page. It's been a really long time since I've done a 12 by 12, so I'm excited to be back in my scrap room. I am looking through the HIP kit for the month of May of 2021. So this is more than a year ago. And I still have some leftovers. I believe I might have made 1 or 2 pages, and so I have plenty. And this rainbow kind of striped paper is really standing out the most to me here. I have some photos from my Cuba trip that I want to scrapbook in a 12 by 12 format. And because I'm using such a colorful background paper, or potentially using such a colorful background paper, I've decided to scrap one of my 2 photos that I decided to print up in black and white. I'm going to use this vertical one. I think it contrasts nicely with the horizontal stripes. So that's what I'm going to use. And I also kept out a piece of really light blue Pink Fresh Studios paper. Both of these are from Pink Fresh Studio from the Keeping It Real collection. And those puffy thickers are also, they're actually not thickers, they're from Pink Fresh Studio too, also from the Keeping It Real collection. So I have my neutral, these are like ledger papers, graph papers, wood grain, and those sorts of things that I sometimes use for backgrounds. And I found one from Studio Calico that's this really beautiful sharp chevron print, but it's very, very subtle. It's white with a very, very light blue chevron print on it. I'm pretty sure I'm going to hold it up at some point so that you can get a bit of a closer look at it. I'm also putting aside a bunch of different white papers because my whole idea for this layout, I don't usually have ideas when I go in, but in this case, I really wanted to do a die cut background, but without using an electronic die cutter. I really wanted to manually die cut my background. Now, of course, the problem is that unless if you have, I believe the Big Shot Pro will die cut a 12 by 12 background paper. Unless you have that one, you're really limited in the size of your background paper that you can die cut. So I happen to have this Spellbinders Grand Caliber from a long, long time ago. My husband gave it to me for Mother's Day. And it is the I'm just showing you here the sizes of them. So relative to my Big Shot, it's not that much bigger, but it has a much, much bigger cutting surface. The cutting surface is 8¼ by 12 inches. And so that means that I can get part of my background paper through this machine. And then I'm not too sure what I'm going to do about the rest of it. My thought here is that I'm just going to wing it. So I'm cutting off that designer strip first so that my paper is 12 by 12, just double checking that I'm going to cut this at the right size. And I'm thinking I'm going to cut it this way. As I mentioned, I'm going to orient that photo so that it's up and down. And now I have one piece that will fit, well, I have 2 different pieces, both of which will fit through my Grand Caliber. So this would have been quite a bit trickier to just use my Big Shot because the cut would have been, I think I might have had to cut it into 3 pieces. Anyhow, I went into my scrapbooking dies and I found this one. It's from Ellie's Studio. I'm pretty sure it is discontinued, but it's all these layered hearts, and some of them, it cuts like a negative space for the hearts, but it also cuts a very thin border strip around the outside edge of the whole shape. And also the inside, like it kind of outlines all of the hearts basically, except for the little ones. So I am going to position that right there and pull over my Grand Caliber. I just put it on my Rascog. I just moved my Big Shot out of the way, and I'm just going to use it in exactly the same way. So I find that this one you do have to crank, like the number of turns you give per inch of movement is greater. So it's a lot of turning, but look at that. I like how it turned out. So see how it gives you that little outline? I'm going to hang on to that, not to use in this project. I will hang on to it in case I want to use it in Project Life, but I'm also hanging on to it so I can keep track of how many of these I'm cutting, because I'm going to want to cut that in either black or gray or white or some type of a pattern, because I'm thinking I'll want to incorporate that into this die cut background as well. So I'm just trying to get a sense of how I'm going to use these hearts on the page. If I'm going to do, at this point, I'm thinking I might do a diagonal, and I'm also deciding to change this photo to a square instead of a rectangle. There was too much that wasn't really relevant to the photo. There was too much filler stuff, like the windows were really tall, and there was a fair chunk of foreground of the floor. And so just cutting it down helps it just stick to the most relevant parts. And it also means that I have more space in my background to play with to come up with some pretty heart patterns. So as you see, I just layered that one so that it was slightly above and slightly to the left of the original die cut shape. And this die set also comes with 2 loose hearts that you can use as well. So I'm just scattering I particularly like the small one because it adds a little bit of extra detail, and I don't want it to be really clear that I'm using the exact same pattern of hearts over and over again. I don't want it to look too predictable on my background, so adding those extra little hearts just help make it look like it's not too repetitive. So yeah, I think I'll put that somewhere around there and put that one up there. I'm just kind of eyeballing it and putting extra detail around the places that look like it might need some extra detail. And so I'll run that through once more. If you're yeah, see, I didn't need that. I thought that this machine would be too heavy for the Razcog, and just to spread out the weight of it a little bit, I put that white piece of, it's like a Jetmax shelf, and it turns out I didn't need it. It made the whole thing slide around too much, and also this machine is not much heavier than my Big Shot anyways, and my Big Shot hasn't caused me any problems on my Razcog, so I was just being overly cautious there. So now, of course, this piece fits through really easily. Again, that's a lot of hand cranking for for the amount of space, but that's okay. Different machines, I find different machines are like that. Like the one that I'm used to using, my Big Shot, which has a much more efficient way of cranking. So there we go, and I'm just tossing the offcuts there, and I'm only keeping the frames. So every time I cut some more, I just come back and play around with where it's going to land on the background so that I can plan out my next cuts. So I'm going to cut this off the edge, and that complicates things a little bit for me, and you'll see why in a few minutes. I'll show you rather than trying to tell you because it's difficult to explain. So I'm just very carefully removing that washi tape because I don't want to tear that background paper, and keeping that last frame. So this is what I've got so far. And my problem here is that at first when I cut that, I thought, oh, I'll just go back and cut it on that side too. But you see what happens if I were to push that over so that the die cut would fit on the plate, then that right side of that paper will overhang and get either folded or crinkled or ripped or whatever. So I can't actually cut the other half, like it's not a half, but the other little bits of that discontinued pattern, but I'll figure out what I'll do later. So this is one of the challenges. And you know what? Doing this many times, it takes a long time, obviously, having to send this through my die cut machine every single time I want to cut a new die. And if you had a silhouette, you could probably pretty easily find something similar to this and cut it out with your silhouette really quickly. I could do it with my brother's scan and cut if I really wanted to, but I like the idea of doing things by hand, and I really wanted to just do this by hand. I wanted to see if it would work, and I like manual die cut machines. I find that it's kind of like a very hands-on, like, what am I trying to say? It is a way of crafting that gets your muscles moving and gets you kind of moving around in your chair, rolling around from side to side of my room, and it's just an energetic way to craft, and I really like using my die cut machine. So now I'm going to cut another 12 by 12 piece of cardstock. This is just basil white cardstock, and I'm going to cut some of these frames now. So I will run this same Ellie's Studio die cut heart cluster. I'm going to run it through a total of 4 times. I don't need any of the offcuts. All I need are the frames. So I'm just putting the frames aside so I don't lose them. There's lots of scraps coming onto my table at this point between all the things that I've been die cutting. So we're halfway done now, this part. And you see how easy it is. Once you get into the swing of it, it's very satisfying to cut these dies. Just using my paper piercer there to release the frame and any other little pieces that are stuck to the die. And I do just make sure that there's no extra little bits of paper as I roll through, because that'll make it thicker, and you know, sometimes it leaves a bit of a weird embossed edge on your die cut or whatever. So there, now I have 4 of those white dies, and at this point I don't even know if I'm going to use them, but I think they're going to give more structure to this die cut piece, because as you can see, it definitely looks like hearts, but I think that once I inset the outline border, like, yeah, the outlines I'll call it, it really adds quite a bit of structure. So I started to think, like, I wanted these dies to be attached to my top layer, like that rainbow paper, but in order for me to do that, I'm not going to be able to cut thin foam adhesive that's thin enough to go on the back of that. And then I thought, well, I could stack a whole bunch of them, but boy, that would mean cutting a whole bunch more, and I don't think I want to do that, and I'm not sure I would like the look of that anyways. So I've changed my mind. I've decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach these framed hearts to the base paper. So right now I am just gluing my top paper, the rainbow paper, not gluing it. I'm attaching it with washi tape to my base paper. And then I am using my Zig two-way glue pen to very thoroughly, I want glue on all of the different parts of these little frames. And I'm gluing it down to that chevron patterned Studio Calico base paper. And I'm just fitting it in the hole, but then I will remove the rainbow paper after I'm finished this step. So I only have frames for those larger pieces. The smaller hearts don't cut frames, so that's all I have to do on this piece of paper is glue those 2 in place. While I wait for them to dry, and also while this paper is on a flat surface instead of popped up with foam dots, I've decided to outline around the outside edge of this. I really like what this adds. I am using my Jelly Roll Sakura 10-point broad tip. What is it called? I'll find out for you. It is the Jelly Roll 10 is all that it's called. And 10 is for the width of it. Basically, it's the wider point. And so I'm just going all the way around the outside edges, not only of the hearts that I have the frames for, but also the other single hearts as well. And that's just going to give this a bit more of a finished look. I was feeling that the heart die inset was just not quite finished enough. I did overlap some of those single hearts so that they looked like they were attached, so that they weren't too different from the overlapped hearts that are the main die that I used 4 times. So there, that is done now. And now my thought is that I will peel this up and those frames will stay on the bottom, stay put. There you go. Oh, there. There are a few places and that's how it's going to look. So you'll be able to see the frames sitting on the background paper below. So this is that Studio Calico, very detailed chevron paper. It looks very much like a solid white, but it has a very faint chevron pattern on it. You'll be able to see it in the close-ups. So next, and I'm just working on one side of this project at once, so still working on the right side. Next, I'm going to put some foam tape all the way around this, and I will zoom out. Eventually, I'll remember that I'm too zoomed in. I just got so kind of caught up in what I was doing that I wasn't even looking at the screen to see how it was looking on screen. There you go. So I'm just positioning this so I'm getting as close as I can to the die cuts with these bigger pieces, because that's a less expensive way to add foam dimension, because these big giant rolls don't cost nearly as much as the little dots that you can get. So I'll do as much as I can with this, and then I'll go in with some Stampin' Up dimensional adhesive, which is the same width as the Scotch big giant roll. So these are going to give me the same height. And it's just going to take me quite a while here to get little tiny pieces of Stampin' Up and dimensional adhesive onto all these little tiny pieces, because I don't want any of them settling in the page protector once I store this page away. I do store all my pages vertically in their albums, so it's not like it's going to have the weight of tons of other layouts on top of it, but I really do want it to hold the space. So that'll give me that nice shadow look that I'm looking for in doing this whole layout. So I am cutting up some really tiny little pieces of these dimensional adhesive, and the borders around the outside edges of the dimensional adhesive gives you a really nice opportunity. You can cut that into little tiny pieces and then use that border for little bits. So yeah, I'm just checking here to make sure that everything that needs to have support has some support, and there was one little corner here that I missed, so I'll just cut up some more of these. I'll put one in there and put one in there, and now everything seems to be holding the space the way that I want it to. So that is how it's going to look. That's how half of it's going to look anyways. My first thought, or one of the thoughts that I had about a solution, I knew I would end up with these two halves, or not exactly half, but these two pieces of my background paper. And my first thought was that I might just put like a layer of a whole other pattern paper on this left side, but I like this pattern paper so much that I want to use the whole thing as my background. So I'll have to figure out what to do about the fact that there's going to be a big giant cut down the middle of it. I will figure that out later. I have some ideas, like maybe I could run some ribbon, or maybe I could just, I don't know. We'll see. I did overlap these two very slightly, so I'm just marking it and trimming down that frame so that it will lay flat on my background. Again with that two-way glue pen. I love it because it's just like a marker and you can just color over those thin little edges. So there we go. I'm really liking how this looks. I'm going to outline around the edges of these hearts as well. Just using the same Jelly Roll pen. I have a whole bunch of white pens, and I find that my Sakura Jelly Roll white pens really work the best. I do also like my Signo Uniball roller pen, but it's less predictable. When it works, it's a really nice, solid, opaque, bright white. I love how it looks. But sometimes it skips, and if it's brand new, it works really well. But once you've had it for a while, it kind of stops working. I always buy 3 packs of them at a time so that I've always got a couple on hand, because if I do use it and it starts to skip, I've already started the project in that really bright white, and there's no other white gel pen that will match it. So I always keep a backup. I would never use it when I was using the last one that I have. It's too risky. But that's part of the reason why I like this Jelly Roll pen, because it's much more reliable. Oh, pardon my voice. I had to clear my throat there. It was getting pretty bad. So I'm just basically doing the exact same thing over here. It's a little bit easier because there are fewer hearts, but there is that one little section that was just barely connected, and it did end up breaking off. I was trying not to break it, but it was inevitable. It was attached by such a tiny little sliver of paper. So the more I moved it around, the more clear it became that it was going to break at some point. I'm going to go to town with the glue dots on this little extra piece so that it definitely stays put once it finds its home on the page. There we go, all kinds. And now I will just add little bits of Stampin' Up! Dimensional adhesive in all of the little nooks and crannies of this intricate little shape. And I'm not actually going to peel off the backings of all of these. So some of these are just to keep space. I don't need to glue every single piece down, as long as most of it is glued down. Stampin' Up! Also makes a very tiny version of their foam adhesive, and that's what I'm using here, just to stick into any little spots. And I'm even cutting one of them in half. And it's mostly on the edges, like where there's a bit of a peninsula or a little bit of a piece of paper that juts out into the open space. Those are the places that I definitely want to make sure I put some foam dots, just to support those spots so they don't fall down. Boy, I'm really going to town with this adhesive. This layout took 3 hours to make. That's an hour longer than most of my videos, of my projects. For 12 by 12 anyways. So there we have it. Now, all that I have to do is adhere this. So I'm starting off with just the 3M foam tape is what I'm definitely going to use that for the gluing. But many of these Stampin' Up! Dimensional adhesive dots, I don't need to take the backing off of them. So I'm just taking kind of strategically the ones that really jut out into the middle. Those are the ones that I'm taking the backing off of. And now I'm doing a little trick that I learned from Kathy Zilski. And maybe everybody else already knows this trick, but what she does is she runs a line of glue across her foam tape so that when she puts it down, she's got a little bit of wiggle room and time before it sticks. And if I didn't do this, I would have one shot to get this in place, and then that would be it. But because I have liquid glue on all of those little parts that have the sticky, I just have a few seconds to smoosh it around in case it wasn't quite right. It turned out it landed pretty close to where it needed to. I just had to scooch it over a teensy bit. I will do the exact same process here. And you don't have to fully cover the foam tape. I wasn't sure if this process would work because there's so much foam tape that is exposed that I thought it's going to grab. surely it will grab, but just that tiny little bead of glue is enough to keep it up. And then once it squishes down, it gives just a little bit of lubrication. Of course, it gets tacky very quickly and dries, but it gives you just a little bit of time there. Now I have this last little piece here, and I'll add some glue here as well. That is a game-changing hack. I don't know, maybe card makers, because they use foam tape a lot, maybe card makers have been doing that all along, but I have never done that before, and I love it. Oh, I really love how this is turning out. I'm going to do a little freeze frame so that you can see a close-up of it. And see what I mean about that really subtle chevron pattern on the background paper? Oh, I love how that looks. It's always nice when an idea that you have comes together and actually turns out, because I wasn't sure if this was going to work. Now I still have a pretty big problem. As you can see, there is a big giant line down the middle of my, not the middle, but down my page. And I'm going to have to figure out what to do about that. But I'm just going to kind of percolate on it. I have this idea that I might use ribbon or a border sticker or who knows what I might do. I'm going to hang on to these and use them maybe in Project Life or something, but I wanted to just show you that my backup idea is that if I hated how this looked, I could always layer another piece of paper over that little portion, but probably not white like that because that would be boring, but just like a coordinating patterned paper, I could just lay over that little edge and that would look nice too. But I really like this pattern paper, that rainbow stripe pattern paper, so much from Pink Fresh Studio that I really want to use the whole page. So I'm going to see if I can come up with some other idea. In the meantime, I'm going to frame my photo. I'm actually going to double frame it because it kind of gets a little lost on the page. And nothing like a black mat to really add some definition to your page. Black details are amazing. I love adding a touch of black every here and there to almost every page. Sometimes I'll do navy blue instead of black, but I really, really like to use black. So see how that photo it becomes the focal point of the page. Even though there's lots going on in the background, just popping that with that black mat just brings the photo closer to your eye almost and pops it out and really directs your attention there. So let's see what we're going to do here with this big slit I have down my layout. Ooh, this is like a little vellum embellishment from... Is it from crepe paper or is it from Studio Calico? I can't remember which company makes it. It didn't turn out to go on the page, but I thought that might do a good job of covering it. Like the thread would cover it. That's fine. I don't hate that. But what I ended up coming up with, I like even more. So I'm going to keep out those vellum circles just in case I decide to go with that, but I'm going to keep looking because my other thought is that I could, and I thought I'd take a picture of that just in case I want to kind of remember what that looked like. And you can see that heart is interrupted, right? That pattern is interrupted down where the line is, and my intention is that my photo will mostly cover that. So I have all of this white baker's twine from Stampin' Up. And my thought is that if I wrapped it around the page many, many times like this, and then tied it in a bow, or even just put a knot, and then I thought, oh, maybe I should add some black baker's twine as well. And ooh, yes, I like that. Maybe a little bit more. Let's try one more round. Yeah, that's good. So I want to tie this as tight as I can because this Stampin' Up! Baker's twine has all these little kinks in it because it was on a flat piece of cardstock instead of being wrapped around something circular like a spool. So I tied that super tight, and I just tied it in a knot for now. And yeah, this turns out so that the tie is on the back, and that's actually not where I want it. So let's try that again. There we go. Now I'll be able to tie it on the front, close to where I tied the white one. My strings aren't even at all, but that's okay. Yeah, so that does a pretty good job of covering the slit down my page. And just to see how it looks, I thought I would just tie a little bow. And I really thought that I wouldn't like it, but it looks pretty okay. Actually, I do like it. The more time goes by, the more I like that little bow up there. I thought about adding the vellum circles, but no, that's too much. So I will just string these back onto their piece of cardstock so that I can use them another time. So basically this is the layout right here. I just need to put a title on it. And what I'm thinking is that it would be really nice if my title could fit right inside of the photo. So I have these puffy letter stickers. They're like a plastic puffy letter sticker. And they are from Pink Fresh Studio from the Keeping It Real collection, which is the same collection the paper's from. So it matches perfectly that darker teal color at the top. And I'm just going to put the word Cuba in the bottom right hand corner of this photo. And I want to make it pop off the page a little bit more. So I'm going to outline, but first I'm outlining in a fine tip pen just to get all the spaces, all the little crevices between my sticker and the paper, like the photo. But then I'm going to come back with a broader tip marker. And what I'm actually using here is a brush tip Faber-Castell Pitt pen. And so I'm pre-outlining just to get all the little nooks and crannies. And then I'm going in with my brush tip pen and see how that adds quite a bit of boldness to my title. Helps it really stand out quite a bit. I do a lot of outlining around the outside edges of my letters. It's one of my favorite things to do. And with this Pitt pen, because it's a brush tip, the harder you press, the thicker the line gets. So I'm just going back in, pressing a little bit harder to thicken up some of these edges and really give this the boldness that I'm looking for. There were a few points where, like, I didn't pre-outline all of those, so I'm just going back and I'm adding. There are little minuscule little bits of white that no one would ever see, but I'm just going back and covering them up. So that's a pretty nice title. At first I thought Cuba, and then I might put some type of a subtitle underneath of it. For some reason, Cuba Love kept like popping out at me, but I'm not going to call this Cuba Love. I'm just going to call it Cuba. I'm going to adhere my photo to my background using more foam tape. So this will be a fairly dimensional layout. And I just left a channel there for the string. So the string will go in that channel that I just showed you. And I'll place it just like that. And I like that the bow looks kind of loopy and casual and not perfect. Now, I don't want to put really any embellishments on this because I like it just the way it is. But what I thought I would do is add some sequins just to bump it up a notch as far as just interest goes, adding a bit of visual interest and some more texture and some shine as well to the page. It's been so long since I've used these little sequin cases that I kind of forgot how they opened there. I'm just making my own little sequin mix of mostly white because I don't realize I actually already have a white sequins mix, and here I'm finding it and realizing, I think I'll use that instead. So I'm using .4mm, 6mm, and 2mm. And then this is the mix that I had already in my stash. So I'm just, as you see, I just like sprinkled it I just put a bunch of them in the palm of my hand and literally sprinkled it all over. And I'm going to leave these mostly where they landed. Even though it has a real spilled look, I like that spilled look. So I'm going to spend a lot of time gluing all these in place, but it is worth it because these sequins really make this page sparkle and shine. And yeah, I just really like it. So for the most part, I'm leaving all of these sequins right where they belong, right where they landed, except I'm going to do a couple of switches because I'm realizing that the sequins in the mix that I used, they're all iridescent and there's too much pink reflecting back. The sequins that I had chosen, those clear and white ones that I had chosen individually, they actually have more of a white look, like with less pink shining through in the reflections. So I'm going to do a couple of strategic replacements. And I'm also layering a couple of sequins over top of sequins that are already on the page, just to tone down some of the pink that was showing. I didn't want so much of it to be pink. I am using Simon Says Stamp Craft Tacky Glue, and it's a pretty good glue. I like that it has a very fine tip and that it doesn't seem to clog. It's worked every time I've used it. I've used it several times now and it hasn't clogged. I don't like it quite as much as my Tombow Mono Multi adhesive. Tombow Mono Multi really does stick to every single thing, whereas I've found a few things that this glue doesn't stick to. Rubber pieces is one of the things that it doesn't stick to. And I don't like having to remember what sticks to what. I like to have a glue that I know just everything sticks to so I don't have to problem solve and remember stuff when I'm scrapping. So anyhow, it does stick to sequins. So I do like the glue, so I'm using it, but I do wish it stuck better to everything. It's a really thick glue too, so I'm surprised it doesn't get clogged in the nozzle, but it doesn't. I do keep it upside down and I keep it with its lid on it. And the lid, I think, does a pretty good job of being like a stopper for the nozzle. So as you can see, there's a few places where I'm just removing some sequins where even though they landed in a place, I might take them off. But I'm not really moving them. I'm either just gluing them where they landed or I'm taking a few off. And I just use my fingers for this because I find I have more control with my own fingers. I tend to have a little bit of long fingernails, so between my nails and my fingers, I can usually grab the things that I need. I know some people use tweezers, but I cannot master the use of tweezers. They just don't do what I want them to do. I think there's something about having that feedback of feeling it against your fingers so you know you've got it at the right angle or something. But as you can see, that spilled sequins look really does add quite a bit of glitter and shine to my page. It really takes it up to the next notch. I like it quite a bit. And I even allowed some of them to stay in the inside parts. I didn't want the inside parts to be totally filled up because I want you to be able to see, like filled up with sequins, I mean, because I want you to be able to really see those outline frames that I glued to the back of that page. Now I'm just kind of evening it out a little bit. So there are a few places that no sequins happened to land, and they just kind of look awkward. So I'm just adding a couple of extra sequins every here and there. Give it a little shake and anything that moves doesn't stay on. I just put my own sequin mix in with that other store-bought sequin mix. I don't know if that's something I made another time or if that's something I bought, but it might have come in a kit as well. There are a few extra sequins on my desk, so I'm just putting those on the layout as well. And then the last thing that I wanted to do was add just a little bit more white to my title. And so I thought what I might do is add some highlights with a white gel pen. I wasn't sure if my Sakura white jelly roll pen would dry properly on that plastic sticker. This Posca pen is just not bright enough, and yeah, it wasn't bright enough, and it wasn't writing properly. It wasn't sticking. So I'm going to use this. It does stick and it did dry. You just want to be careful because it doesn't dry very quickly. You have to, I'm going to, actually, I think right there, I'm putting my hand right in. Oh, not yet. Yeah, right now I am messing up the A. So see, I messed up the little tail on the A. So, I mean, it was still wet, so I just wiped it off with my finger. And now I just need it to dry a little bit so that the glue pen will, or the gel pen will stick to it. And there we go. Just wanted to make that highlight a teensy bit bigger. And now I'm thinking, do I want to do, well, I do want to put a tiny bit of journaling, so let's do that first. I grabbed my Brother typewriter, and even though this is all die cut up, I thought that putting the whole paper through my typewriter would keep it in place a little bit better than just putting a tiny little piece through. And I'm going to type out here, it says, meeting up with Fee and Brian at the gourmet restaurant. And I like to put a bit of extra space between my lines just so that I can trim it down. So there we go. Whoops, I didn't, there we go. You just need your carriage to be in the center in order to put the storage case on. So I'm just using my Stampin' Up! Trimmer here to trim down those little journaling strips. They don't have to be perfect, but for some reason I try to perfect this one. Don't do that. It's like, it doesn't have to be perfect. At first I thought I might put the journaling right there because it covers over that less important part of the photo where our legs are. But then really from a design perspective, I like it better down here. It's nice that your eye has a place to go to after it reads the title, so I'll put this here. And again, for whatever reason, this craft tacky glue it's not holding it down the way that I want it to. It's not getting tacky fast enough. That glue will glue paper to paper, like there's no problem there. It just wasn't gluing it fast enough for me, so I switched over to my Tombow Mono Multi because it tacks up super fast and holds these strips in place so they're not going anywhere. One of these strips does jut out into the center of the little die cut area, so I just put a tiny little Stampin' Up! Dimensional adhesive behind that. And now I thought I was done, but it really does feel like it needs something else white and on the photo, just up beside the word Cuba. So I changed my mind and I changed my mind back. I'm going to use that star right there. I just like how it looks. It just adds a little something else to the page. I think without it, it's a little unembellished. At least there's one single embellishment on this besides the letters and the sequins and the journaling. Then I wanted to use a roller date stamp. I wasn't sure where I would use it, but I wanted to get the date on there. So I'm going to actually stamp it in gray ink, and I just double stamped it there just so it's not quite so bold. I don't want to draw your attention down there too much. So before I show the photos of this one up close, which you should check out because they're really nice, quick shout out to my patrons. Thank you so much to everybody on the screen right there. They help make this channel keep happening. And here are some of the close-ups. So I really love how that background paper looks, that Studio Calico chevron paper. It's from their grid collection. I think that's what that was called. Yeah, Grid 3 from their grid collection. So thanks so much for watching. Take care and have a really great scrappy week.